This little video is about how to repair lines at Frick Park tennis courts. Not everybody who works there agrees with everything that I have put in here, but it's the methods that I use, and I guess it's better than nothing. So let's begin. The equipment needed to repair lines is generally stored in the green metal box that's right next to court 1. The main thing you'll find in there is a clear plastic bucket which kind of serves as the line repair kit. In it you will find a heavy-duty screwdriver, a mallet-sized hammer, a couple of heavy-duty channel lock pliers, although you could use vice grips as well, they work well, and a special line stretching contraption which you'll see how is used later. I always bring a set of knee pads, as well as several pairs of work gloves. I bring a heavy-duty broom, although you could use one of the line sweeping brooms. They work okay. You will also need a lute out of the equipment pile. I also have this little piece of equipment which I use for cutting clay to bury the lines. It's a little controversial, but I like using it. The first thing you'll need to do is identify which lines need to be fixed. And it seems like it would be pretty straightforward, but actually there's a little bit of nuance in that. This is a pretty obvious case where the line has actually popped out of the clay. Another situation is where the line is kind of more or less in place, but is sitting on top of the clay loose. Here's a little bit more of an ambiguous situation. The line is pretty firmly in the clay, but is exposed on both sides. It's kind of a judgment call. I do have a method for fixing lines that aren't out but need to be reburied more with additional material. You need to use the right material, and you need to approach it in the right way, but it works as well. Like I said, it's a judgment call, and I'm going to have a separate video on how to do that. The next step is to remove all the loose material away from the lines. Mostly this is going to be brick dust or brick chips, and they do not make very good structural support for the lines. You really need clay. So getting them away from there and then doing the repair is generally the right thing to do. You'll be putting them back on later, but for the repair itself, we don't want a lot of brick chips in there because they won't hold the line in place. Once you've identified a line that needs fixing, the next step is to find the anchor clips. Each line has at least one clip at each end. The clip has been driven into an anchor pipe, and that looks like what you see on the screen. We use two basic styles of clips. There are single flange clips and double flange clips. Both work very well, and neither is better than the other. The next step is to pry up enough of the clip to be able to get the pliers in place. Use a hammer as leverage for the screwdriver to get this done. Thank you, Roberto, for teaching me that awesome technique. Once enough of the clip is up to put the pliers in place, use the same technique to completely pull the clip out of the anchor pipe. Make sure to put the lever part of the pliers on the line and not on the clay to reduce the amount of surface damage. Once you have enough of the clip out of the anchor pipe, just use the pliers to complete the job. Here is a complete video of me pulling up a double-sided clip. Once in a while you're doing this, you may find you actually pull the entire ankle pipe out of the dirt. Don't be alarmed if that happens. Just use the mallet to smash it back in there. Um, it's not great when it happens, but it's not fatal either. Once you've loosened the first clip, then pull the entire line out. It is possible once in a while to fix part of a line, but it's very difficult and it usually just doesn't work. Also, please notice the amount of clay that's underneath the line. You're going to need that clay in order to reset the line when you're finished. At this point, what we're going to do is we're going to use the lute to remove all the loose clay that was trapped underneath the line, and then push it to the side for reuse when we're all finished. Now we use the lute to remove all of the loose material that was underneath the line. Basically use the front edge of the lute like a knife and carve it out, and use the rest of the lute to kind of push it off to the side. This video should show you how that's done. The next step is to take a line, put it back into the trench, and stretch it as far as it's comfortable to do using that handy little crazy looking device that I pulled out of the clear repair kit box. I'll show you how to do that. The main point is that the tighter the line is, the better it's going to stay down, because there's less slack and less things that can grab hold of the sides. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up the line stretcher like you see it in the illustration. Let me go through this step by step. First, take one end of the line stretcher and attach it into one of the open slots on the line. This is what it should look like after you have that part of the setup together. Hook the other end of the extender, both little flanges, into the clay, and then kneel on top of them, and then use the crank to stretch the line out. Hopefully this video will make it a little bit easier to see all the steps come together. The idea is to stretch the line so that the next slot, or a tighter slot, will be in alignment with the anchor hole or post underneath, and then you'll be able to re-drive the clip through the whole thing. Let's just watch the video. When everything is lined up, put the clip through a slot in the line, make sure it's going into the anchor post, and then pound away with the hammer. Make sure that the clip edge is pointed away from the rest of the line. If you don't do it that way, the line will just slip off the clip. What you'll sometimes find is that there will be a little bit of line left over after the anchor pipe that will need to be secured somehow. Different ways have been done over the years. Some folks have put nails in there. I will put an additional clip in and just pound it directly into the clay. There's a couple things you can do. Just be aware that if you do put a clip or do put a nail, it won't support anything, and you pull on it, it's going to come right out. So really the bulk of the support is done by the clip in the anchor pipe. Here it is an example of one that had nails stuck in at the end to hold down the bottoms. If you do this enough times, you'll see all kinds of things out here. The next part of the process is a little bit controversial. I use a couple of tools to expand the trench so that the idea is that the line will lay in there comfortably and you don't have to push it in. Other people will put it in here and then pound it down. Either way, it doesn't really matter. This to me is just a little more like how I like to do it. Here's a bit better illustration of what I'm talking about. The top picture shows how things are right now as soon as the line is removed, and what I like to do is try to get it to look like the bottom picture so everything sits in there nicely. Here is me using that handy dandy little tool I showed at the beginning to cut out the clay and make it so that the lines on the side are more straight up and down and they fit in easier. The last two steps can be pretty much done in either order. I do it the way I illustrated here, but you could, if you wanted to, um, use the tool to clean out the line a little bit better, lay the line down, and then come back and cut the trench a little better, and then tighten it. The only thing is, if you do it that way, there's a possibility that the line could be crooked because you kind of guided it into a bad spot. Um, Again, as long as you get from point A to point B, it doesn't really matter. The next step of the operation will be to use a lute to take the material that you dug out from underneath the line to rebury the line. The following video section shows how that's done. It's actually pretty simple. You just use the lute, push the loose material along, kind of balance the lute on top of the line because that's your kind of balance point, and anything that falls underneath will go into any holes or depressions or whatever kind of automatically. You might have to go back and forth a couple times. The other thing is to make sure you pay attention for cross clips or clips from other parts of different lines and make sure you don't dig them up in the process, but the lute will catch on those. Just don't push too hard, just move around them and you should be fine. At this point, the next step for some of us is to take the pounder, which is that flat plate with the um, rod on the end of it, and just go along the line and push the line down a little bit further, just pounding it inch by inch all the way along its distance. I don't usually do that, but you can, and it certainly won't hurt anything, because I find it may tend to pop parts of the line up. And if it's buried properly and once it's watered, it'll be fine. But if you're not sure, it's certainly an okay thing to do, and it's not going to hurt anything, generally speaking. Once that's done, I'm going to need to get videos for these last two parts. You use the lute and redistribute the brick chips, which were on top of the line that we moved away with the brush in the beginning, and pushed them back and flatten that all out. Then take a grooving brush like you use on the quartz and just go over this whole thing and figure eights and back and forth and et cetera, et cetera. Everyone has a little religion about that. It really doesn't matter as long as you get the material fairly even. And then when you're finished, you water the whole thing down. And that's what really sets the line. I'll add some more videos for that, but this is the first version of this, and this will do for now. So until next time, adios.